right, I am back with a combo video, but mainly about one thing, which is Sony's absolutely insane week. This was originally going to be just about Concord, but now Astro Bot reviews have just dropped, and it is the most largest gap you could see between good news and bad news in a single week here for Sony and PlayStation. We will go in chronological order here. Earlier this week, Sony announced that Concord was going to just be flat out shut down this Friday. It has done so poorly that they're just straight up taking it offline 2 weeks after it debuted. I've never seen anything like this. People are like, it's like the day before. Yeah, the day before was 1.5 dudes and a total scam project. This is a AAA release that took anywhere from 4 to 8 years to make, and anywhere from $50 to $100 million, and an enormous project that I've never seen anything like this. We can talk about all these failed games and things like that, but whatever you're thinking of, whatever comes to mind, Anthem, Marvel's Avengers, Battleborn, all of these games lasted anywhere from months to years. Shutting a game down in 2 weeks is nuts. But you can understand that the numbers here were so bad that it actually makes sense. As we've discussed, it peaked at under 700 players on Steam at launch. As far as I know, it's gone down every day since. I think it's topping out somewhere between 100 and 150 players a night now. Now, after it's being shut down, apparently people are just jumping off the map to complete games to get trophies before it's dead, probably forever. And then on PlayStation, I don't think it ever got above 30th or 40th in terms of sales at launch. Now it's 150th in terms of sales. There's a report from IGN that it's only sold 25,000 units total, which is $1 million on a, again, $50 to $100 million budgeted game. Total disaster. And shutting it down doesn't offset that loss, but you don't have to support it. You don't have to invest more money into live stuff, even though a lot of that live stuff is already made, future characters, future cutscenes, whatever. That was done to a certain extent, at least. So that's just gone now. Even a game like Suicide Squad, which is clearly not going to last more than its first year of content, is finishing that year of content. And even Suicide Squad debuted with numbers 1,000% better than Concord, even though they were still terrible. Suicide Squad was the number one selling game on PlayStation for a couple of days. I think people forget that. So, and that still ended up being a $200 million disaster because of its budget and its eventual collapse not shortly after launch. They made some reference to this idea that Concord is going to be coming back in some form, maybe where they're reevaluating what is possibly going to happen with it, implying that they might bring it back as free to play. Don't bother. I know that this is a common thought that Concord was going to go free to play, but there's no real point in doing this. These numbers are so bad, there's no recovery for this game at all. And they're saying, oh, it wasn't the way we wanted it at launch, and we didn't. Fundamentally, this is a 5v5 hero shooter, which is not changing. Fundamentally, this is a roster of deeply unappealing characters in various ways, which is not going to be redone in any significant way. There's nothing they can change about balance or adding new maps or whatever, or a new hero that's going to move the needle. And we've already seen what interest in this game is being free. The open beta that was free had 2,300 players, and now it launched on Steam, and then it launched with a third of that. It's gone. There's no reason it should come back at all, which is very sad. You got to feel for the developers here. People are being assholes and be well, they should have made a better game. It's they did the best they could with the mandate they had, which was either from Firewalk itself or from Sony, where you got to make a live game. We're trying to make live games that make money. This is obviously a huge contrast from Helldivers 2, a wildly successful live game that launched with Sony, and even though it's dropped a lot, it still has a decently consistent player base. And Concord was the opposite of that. The Concord story is also the opposite of what is happening today, where Astro Bot reviews have dropped. I think there's 100 in. Last time I looked at it as a 94 on Metacritic. those are crazy high numbers. We rarely see that. It also makes it the best reviewed full game release of the year. If you go and like look at the top Metacritic charts, Shadow of the Erdtree is number one. That is an expansion. It does require the base game. It is not a new game. There's a lot of like remasters and digital collections and stuff, and it's pretty much like Final Fantasy and Tekken 8, a bunch of indie games, and then Concord is leading the pack by a significant margin. It is instantly a Game of the Year contender, if not a Game of the Year frontrunner. Not only that, I'm hearing it is like one of the best platformers ever. I didn't even request a review copy of this. I figured I might play it, at launch. It looked cool in the trailers, but I'm not really, this isn't really my type of genre, as you might expect, given my interests of looting and grinding and whatever. But obviously I'm going to play it now. I already pre-downloaded it. Like, I can't not play this if it's really that good. And like people are comparing it to like some of the better Mario games, which is nuts. I mean, I believe them. Like, I have no reason not to believe them. And, this is a enormous win for PlayStation after the biggest failure in like probably gaming history. Astro Bot may not be the biggest success in gaming history, but like, I don't know, a couple people are calling it game of the generation. There's some amount of hyperbole maybe, but what's clear is it is a very good game. It's reviewing very well. It is on a path to potentially win Game of the Year. It is hard for me to think of other upcoming games here that have a chance of being this well reviewed and this well liked. I don't see any hitting that mark unless something like really surprises us. It just seems very unlikely. So yes, I would definitely consider it a front runner there. And we're not quite sure yet how this translates into sales. Astro's Playroom was, included in PlayStation. It's a very popular game, but we'll see if like this word of mouth of big reviews and stuff translates into sales. PlayStation has been dying to break into like the market for like the younger crowd, because think of all the PlayStation games that are thought of as the biggest games, the greatest games: God of War, brutal murder; Last of Us, brutal murder; Horizon Zero Dawn, PG-13 robot murder; Ghosts of Tsushima, brutal murder. Like you get the idea here, where they do not have a franchise like that to appeal to younger kids, like very young kids in this case. And this is quote, their Mario or their Crash Bandicoot, since Xbox owns Crash Bandicoot now, which is very strange. And this seems like it's the beginning of a larger series of these types of games with Astro Bot. If this is such a big success, I'm sure we'll get more of these games, some more platformers. This also, the divide here is not just success versus failure. The divide is we invested a shit ton into live service, which failed miserably in this case, and we invested probably a lesser amount of money. I don't know Astro Bot's budget, but I have no doubt it was lower than Concord, into a very simple, streamlined, high-quality platformer that everybody loves and is probably going to win Game of the Year. We've seen this, this split has been so obvious and so many times. Like over the past year, the split was between Hogwarts Legacy, a microtransaction-free single-player game, and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, a live service ongoing game where Hogwarts Legacy was one of the biggest hits in recent memory, one of the only games to ever top Call of Duty in yearly sales, and Suicide Squad lost $200 million. And yet WB is still like, yeah, we should do some more live service. So I don't know if the industry is learning lessons here. I was previously going to talk about how Concord feels like a moment that should scare everybody working on live service. Like, it's always been risky to come out with a PvP live service game in the current market, but now it's more brutal than ever. And like, not just from Sony, there are many of these games in the works, and it has been shown to be so freaking hard to break into the current, Fortnite, Warzone, Apex, CSGO, like these PvP games that everyone is already playing and has been playing for 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years. It is very hard to break through that, and almost all of them will fail. I don't want to say it's easier to make a good, popular single-player games, but most of the biggest hits in terms of like critical reception and sales have been single player games, often, in the last few years, often without any microtransactions at all. This is still like a questionable model in terms of a lot of the time the budgets are so sprawling and massive that you have to sell just an enormous amount of copies to make it worth it. I think a lot of these games have. I wrote about Black Myth Wukong today, which has sold 18 million copies. It's one of the fastest selling games of all time. China with it's ginormously boosted that to high heavens, but it still counts. Like Chinese gamers, really love that game, and it's a massive hit, and it's single player with no microtransactions, and it's probably going to get an expansion, and that has appealed to the Western market too, as it's a pretty good game. I didn't love it, but by all accounts, it's a pretty good game. And single players can also fail, disappoint, whatever. Like Star Wars Outlaws is not doing amazingly. They cut, analysts cut sales forecasts, didn't review like incredibly well. In the bottom half of Ubisoft games, so like it's not necessarily a guarantee if you throw a bunch of money at a single player game, it's going to do well, and you have budgets to be worried about. Astro Bot, I have no doubt, has a much smaller budget than a lot of these giant, motion captured blockbuster games. So that seems, kind of like the best of all possible worlds, where you're going to have this super high quality, hopefully well selling single player game that did not, cost an insane amount of money to make, and it's a win for everybody. So that's very cool to see. Not very cool to see Concord fail to such a degree that it has created like a crater in the entire industry. It's simply astonishing, and it's good to have some good news in the form of Astro Bot reviewing so well, and I am definitely jumping on that tomorrow. Weekend plans probably not going to let me play it then, but I will be playing it all next week. So I will probably pre-recommend it. I mean, these reviews are crazy, so I would definitely highly consider that, even if this may not normally be your type of game. It seems like it's something that's fun for everybody. So RIP Concord, long live Astro Bot. Astro Bot is launching the day Concord shuts off. Like, I can't script something better than that. Like, that's crazy. So anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.